Guys, tonight we slip into the misty dawn of Japan, where the first women carved lives from wild forests and whispering seas. Picture yourself standing on a rocky shore, salt stinging your nose, as women dive into icy waves for shellfish, their laughter echoing over crashing surf. Life here is raw. Think less Zen garden. More, you probably won't survive this winter without serious grit. These women aren't just surviving, they're shaping a world. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where you're drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in Japan's prehistoric haze, around 10,000 BCE, where the Jomon period kicks off. The air's thick with pine and damp earth. Women, the backbone of these early tribes, aren't waiting for anyone to hand them a rulebook. You watch them weave nets from plant fibers, their fingers deft despite the cold. They're not just gathering food, they're mapping the land, knowing which berries won't kill you and which roots need roasting. Mainstream history tells us Jomon women were central to survival, managing food and crafting pottery with those iconic cord-mark designs. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some archaeologists think these women might have been the first to ferment fish into an early sushi-like snack. Talk about a glow-up from raw clams. Historians still argue whether they held formal power, or if their influence was quieter, woven into daily rituals. You trudge through a village of pit houses, half buried like hobbit homes. Smoke curls from a fire where a woman kneads clay, humming something you can't quite catch. She's making a pot, not for Instagram, but to store acorns through brutal winters. You try lifting one. It's heavier than your gym bag. These women aren't soft. Their arms are corded from hauling wood and grinding nuts. You notice they share tasks with men, but there's a vibe. Women run the show when it comes to food and hearth. You smirk, thinking modern meal prep influencers could learn a thing or two. A kid runs by, chasing a dog that's basically a wolf. You flinch, but the women don't. They've seen worse. Like that time, a boar charged the camp. The sea calls you next. You're wading in, shivering, as women dive deeper than you dare. They're after abalone, and they hold their breath like Olympians. You're out of breath just watching. Back on shore, they trade stories, maybe about a weird shell shaped like a heart. Someone jokes it's cursed, and you all laugh, but you're secretly checking your pockets. Life's communal. Everyone eats or starves together. You feel the weight of it, the way every choice ripples. These women aren't written in history books, but their hands built the foundation of Japan. You're starting to get why their story matters, and it's only the beginning. You're knee-deep in the Jomon world now, the forest humming around you like a living thing. It's still thousands of years before samurai or sushi bars, and you're trailing a group of women as they move through their daily grind. The air smells of wet leaves and smoke, and your sandals, well, let's be real, your bare feet are caked in mud. These women don't have time for your modern complaints. They're too busy keeping everyone alive. You're about to see what their everyday life feels like. And spoiler, it's not a spa day. Mainstream history says Jomon women were the glue of their communities, handling food, crafts, and childcare, while men hunted or fished. You watch one woman, her hair tied back with a vine, pound acorns into flour with a stone. Her hands are calloused, and she's faster at this than you'd be at texting. She catches you staring and offers a smirk. Okay, maybe you're imagining that, but she's definitely got presence. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Jomon women might have worn shell jewelry, not just for style, but as a kind of proto-currency for trading with neighboring tribes. Imagine bartering with a clamshell necklace. Etsy's got nothing on these ladies. Historians still argue whether these women led rituals or if their spiritual role was more informal, like whispering prayers while weaving. You follow her to a clearing where others are working. One's twisting hemp into rope, her fingers flying like she's knitting without needles. You try to mimic her, but your rope looks like a toddler's art project. She laughs, actually laughs, and you're both chuckling over your failure. Nearby, kids play, mimicking their moms by cooking with sticks. The community's tight. Everyone's in everyone's business, but it works. You notice the women share everything: food, tools, even gossip about that guy who keeps losing his spear. It's like a group chat, but with more stakes. The day shifts, and you're foraging with them now. They point out plants you'd walk past: burdock roots, wild yams, berries that look suspicious but apparently won't kill you. You hesitate, and one woman nudges you, like, "Eat it, city kid." You do, and it's tart, but good. They're teaching you without words, their knowledge passed down like a family recipe. You think of those cord-marked pots from last section. Remember those? They're everywhere, holding dried fish or nuts. You're starting to get why these women were so vital. They didn't just feed people, they built systems. Evening falls, and you're by a fire, the crackle soothing your nerves. The women are still at it, repairing nets or sharpening tools. You're exhausted just watching, but they've got this rhythm, like they're dancing with the land itself. One tells a story, maybe about a fox spirit, you're not sure, but her voice is low and pulls you in. You're struck by how their lives so far from yours, feel familiar. They're not queens or warriors, just women making it work. You're starting to respect their hustle, and you're curious what's next. You're now in the Yayoi period, around 300 BCE, and the world feels different, wetter, muddier, alive with the churn of new ways. Rice paddies stretch before you, reflecting a cloudy sky, and the air's heavy with the scent of earth and sweat. You're trudging alongside Yayoi women, their hands stained from planting rice, their lives tied to the rhythm of seasons. This isn't the foraging free-for-all of Jomon days. You're in the thick of Japan's first farming revolution, and these women are working harder than ever. Mainstream history marks the Yayoi period as when rice agriculture transformed Japan, with women playing key roles in planting and harvesting. You're sloshing through a paddy, trying to keep up with a woman who's sinking rice seedlings into the mud with precision. She's fast, like she's done this 1,000 times, which she probably has. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Yayoi women might have used fish bones as hairpins, both practical and a flex of their fishing skills. Historians still argue whether women had equal status with men, or if their labor gave them unspoken influence in village life. You're handed a seedling, and you fumble, dropping it into the water. The woman next to you chuckles, her eyes crinkling like she's used to newbies. You try again, mimicking her, and manage to plant one without it floating away. Your back aches already. Modern yoga's got nothing on this. Around you, other women sing softly, a work song that keeps everyone in sync. It's hypnotic, and you're swaying a bit, caught in the cadence. You notice the village nearby. Wooden houses raised on stilts, safer from floods. Remember those Jomon pit houses? These are an upgrade, and you're secretly jealous of their waterproofing. The day drags on, and you're helping weave straw mats now, your fingers clumsy compared to theirs. These mats aren't just for sitting. They're for drying rice, wrapping tools, even trading. One woman jokes that your mat looks like a bird's nest, and you laugh, but she's not wrong. You're struck by their resourcefulness. Nothing goes to waste. They're not just farmers, they're engineers, economists, and moms all at once. You spot kids helping, carrying water in clay jars, and you realize this is a family affair. The women teach by doing, their knowledge as vital as the rice itself. Evening settles, and you're eating with them. Rice, fish, maybe some wild greens. It's simple, but filling, and you're grateful after the day's work. Firelight dances on their faces as they talk, maybe about a bad harvest or a neighbor's new bronze tool. You're starting to see how their labor shapes not just fields, but futures. These women aren't in history scrolls, but their hands are sewing Japan's roots. You're tired, but you're hooked, wondering what's coming next. You're now in the Yayoi period's twilight, around 250 CE, where whispers of power and mystery swirl. The air's thick with incense and the hum of chants, and you're standing in a crowd, watching a woman who commands attention like no one you've seen. This is the age of shaman queens, and you're about to meet Himiko, Japan's legendary priestess queen, whose spiritual reign shapes a fledgling nation. The ground beneath you feels alive, pulsing with belief. Mainstream history knows Himiko from Chinese records, like the Weiji, which describe her as a shaman who ruled Yamatai, uniting tribes through diplomacy and divine rituals. You're at one of her ceremonies, the crowd hushed as she raises her arms, bronze mirrors glinting on her robes. Her voice, low and rhythmic, calls to spirits, and you're half convinced the wind answers. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some say Himiko's followers tattooed fish scales on their arms, believing it pleased sea gods. Imagine explaining that at a modern tattoo parlor. Historians still argue whether Himiko was a real ruler or a mythologized figure, her story shaped by Chinese scribes. You edge closer, noticing her attendants, all women, their faces painted with red ochre. They're not just backup singers. They're priestesses in training, learning to read omens in bird flights or cracked turtle shells. You try to peek at a shell, but an attendant shoots you a look. Yep, you're not initiated. The ritual's intense, and you're sweating despite the cool air. Himiko's power isn't in swords. It's in her ability to make people believe. You think back to those Yayoi rice fields. Remember the women's work songs. This feels like their spiritual echo, binding communities in a different way. The day shifts, and you're following the attendants to a sacred grove. They're preparing offerings, rice, fish, even tiny clay figures that look like dolls. You pick one up, and it's heavier than it looks, like it holds secrets. One attendant jokes that you'd make a terrible shaman, tripping over roots, and you laugh, but you're secretly relieved to stay on the sidelines. You notice how these women balance reverence with practicality, organizing the crowd like event planners with divine side gigs. Their role isn't just spiritual. They're diplomats, keeping rival clans from brawling. Night falls, and you're back at the ceremony, stars sharp overhead. Himiko's chanting slows, and the crowd sways, entranced. You're caught up too, feeling the weight of a world where spirits and survival intertwine. These women, from Himiko to her attendants, aren't just leading prayers, they're forging a culture. You're starting to grasp their influence, and you're curious how it evolves next. You're stepping into the Kofun period, around 300 CE, where massive burial mounds loom like silent giants. The air's heavy with dust and ambition, and you're weaving through a society where elite women, wield power in the shadows of chiefs and kings. No more shamanic chants. Now it's about politics, alliances, and the art of influence. You're about to see how these women navigate a world of bronze bells and budding hierarchies. Mainstream history notes that Kofun women of high status, often linked to ruling families, held significant sway, managing estates and diplomatic ties. You're trailing one such woman, her silk robes brushing the ground as she inspects a construction site for a keyhole-shaped tomb. Her voice is calm but firm, directing workers like a CEO who doesn't need to shout. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Kofun women wore magatama beads, curved jewels thought to channel spirits. Imagine rocking a necklace that's half bling, half talisman. Historians still argue whether these women were co-rulers or merely advisors, their roles blurred by male-centric records. You follow her to a clan meeting where men debate trade with Korea. She's quiet, but her nod shifts the room's mood. Everyone's watching her. You're impressed. It's like she's playing chess while they're stuck on checkers. You try to blend in, but your clumsy bow earns a smirk from a guard. You're not fooling anyone. The meeting's about securing iron, and she suggests a marriage alliance. Her daughter to a rival's son. It's strategic, and you realize she's not just managing a household, she's shaping a dynasty. The day moves, and you're at her estate, where she oversees weavers crafting intricate cloth. The patterns are stunning, and you're tempted to sneak a sample, but her sharp glance stops you cold. She jokes to a weaver about men's terrible taste in robes, and you chuckle. Her humor's dry but relatable. You think back to Himiko's rituals. Remember those bronze mirrors. They're here too, symbols of status, reflecting wealth as much as spirits. These women use every tool, from charm to commerce, to hold their ground. Evening falls, and you're at a feast, the air rich with grilled fish and sake. She's hosting, ensuring every guest feels honored. Her hospitality, a subtle power play. You're stuffed, but awed by her multitasking, greeting, strategizing, even scolding a servant without breaking stride. These elite women aren't just ornaments, they're architects of a new Japan. You're starting to see their legacy in the mounds themselves, and you're eager for what's next. You're gliding into the Heian period, around 794 CE, where Kyoto's courts shimmer with silk and intrigue. The air's perfumed with plum blossoms, and you're shadowing women whose words, penned in delicate calligraphy, shape Japan's golden age. Forget rice paddies. You're in a world of poetry, power plays, and women who wield brushes like swords. These courtly ladies are rewriting what it means to be influential, and you're about to dip your toes in their ink. Mainstream history celebrates Heian women like Murasaki Shikibu, whose tale of Genji is often called the world's first novel. Proving Women drove Japan's literary boom. You're in a palace chamber, watching a noblewoman compose a poem on scented paper. Her brush dances, and you're mesmerized, though you'd probably spill ink everywhere. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some court ladies used blackened teeth, ohaguro, as a beauty trend, thinking it made their smiles pop. Imagine pitching that to your dentist. Historians still argue whether these women's influence was limited to culture or if their writings subtly shaped political decisions. You try to peek at her poem, but she slides it away, her fan flicking like a polite back off. You grin, caught, and she smirks. Courtly shade is universal. The room's alive with women chatting, their layered robes a rainbow of status. They're not just gossiping, they're trading verses that can win allies or ruin reputations. You think back to those Kofun Magatama beads. Remember their spiritual weight. Here, it's poetry that carries power, each word a jewel. You're handed a fan to paint, but your attempt looks like a toddler's doodle, and a lady giggles, saying it's rustic. You laugh, but you're secretly plotting a comeback. The day shifts, and you're at a court event where women perform music and dance. One plays the koto, its strings humming like a lullaby, and you're swaying despite yourself. These women aren't just entertainers. They're diplomats, using art to soothe rival factions. You notice their education, Chinese classics, Buddhist texts, and realize they're outsmarting half the men here. One jokes about a lord's terrible poem, and you snort, earning a nod of approval. Their wit is sharp, but their lives are confined. They navigate screens and etiquette like a maze. Evening falls, and you're in a quiet garden, moonlight on a pond. The women are still writing, their lamps flickering. You're struck by their discipline, turning fleeting emotions into timeless words. They're not queens, but their stories will outlast empires. You're starting to feel their world's pull, and you're curious what's next. You're thrust into the turbulent Kamakura period, around 1185 CE, where the air crackles with hoofbeats and the clang of steel. Gone are the perfumed Heian courts. Now you're on a battlefield's edge, shadowing women who trade silk fans for swords. These are the Onabugisha, warrior women, and you're about to see how they fight, love, and carve their names into a samurai world. The ground's muddy, and your heart's racing. This is no place for the faint. Mainstream history records women like Tomoe Gozen, a legendary Onabugeisha who fought in the Genpei War. Her skill with a naginata blade, unmatched. You're watching one such warrior, her armor glinting as she trains, slicing through straw dummies like they're butter. She's all focus, and you're half scared, half obsessed. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Onabugeisha carried kaiken daggers hidden in their sleeves, perfect for a sneaky stab or a dramatic hairpin escape. Historians still argue whether these women were common or exceptional, their stories amplified by later tales. You try to keep up as she mounts a horse, her movements fluid, while you'd probably face plant. She catches your awkward shuffle and grins, tossing you a practice sword. You swing it badly, and she laughs, saying it's a start. You're both chuckling, but the mood shifts as war horns sound. She's off, leading a small band of fighters, and you're scrambling to follow. You think back to those Heian poets. Remember their delicate brushes. This woman's poetry is in her blade, each strike a verse. Her role isn't just combat. She's protecting her clan's honor, a duty heavier than her armor. The day presses on, and you're at a camp where she's strategizing with samurai. She's respected, her voice cutting through male egos like her sword through foes. You're impressed, but notice her softer side. She checks on a wounded soldier, her touch gentle. Later, she jokes about a rival's terrible archery, and you snort, earning a nod. These women balance ferocity and family, often training their sons to fight. You see her spar with a teenager, her pride clear despite her stern corrections. Night falls, and you're by a fire, the air sharp with pine and smoke. She's sharpening her blade, her face lit by embers. You're struck by her resolve. She's not just fighting for now, but for a legacy. Onabugeisha aren't the norm, but their courage ripples through time. You're starting to feel their fire, and you're eager for what's next. You're now in the medieval heart of Japan, around 1300 CE, far from the clash of samurai swords. The air's thick with dust and the faint tang of millet, and you're walking beside peasant women whose lives are a daily grind under feudal lords. No poetry or blades here, just backbreaking work and quiet resilience. You're about to feel the weight of their world, where survival is the only victory. Mainstream history shows that peasant women in feudal Japan were the backbone of rural life, toiling in fields and homes while men were often conscripted for war. You're in a village, watching a woman hoe a barley patch, her hands rough as tree bark. She's relentless, and you're already tired just watching. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some peasant women brewed a crude sake from leftover rice, trading it for tools. Think of it as the original side hustle. Historians still argue whether these women had any agency or were crushed by the feudal system's demands. You try to help her, grabbing a hoe, but your first swing's so clumsy she snorts, muttering something about city folk. You laugh, and she softens, showing you the rhythm. Your arms burn, and you're wondering how she does this all day. The village is alive. Kids chase chickens, elders mend nets, and women are everywhere, weaving, cooking, hauling water. You think back to those onabugeisha. Remember their fierce blades. These women fight too, but their battlefield is hunger, taxes, and storms. Their strength is in enduring. The day wears on, and you're helping carry baskets of radishes to a market. The load's heavy, and you're grumbling, but she teases that you'd starve without her. You chuckle, but she's right. Her knowledge of crops and seasons keeps everyone fed. You notice her bartering, sharp and savvy, trading vegetables for cloth. She's not educated like Heian ladies, but she's outsmarting peddlers with ease. Life's harsh, tax collectors lurk, and famine's a bad harvest away. But she's got grit, sharing her meager meal with a neighbor. Evening settles, and you're by a hearth. The fire's warmth a small mercy. She's mending a torn kimono, her fingers nimble despite the day's toll. You're struck by her quiet defiance. She's not in sagas, but her labor holds the village together. These women are Japan's unsung roots, and you're starting to see their strength as heroic. You're curious what's next. You're slipping into the quiet world of Japan's medieval monasteries around 1400 CE, where the air hums with sutras and the scent of sandalwood incense. You're trailing Buddhist nuns, women who've traded worldly ties for shaved heads and simple robes. No fields or swords here, just meditation, discipline, and a search for meaning. You're about to feel the calm and complexity of their spiritual lives, and it's a far cry from the bustle you've seen. Mainstream history notes that Buddhist nuns, or bhikkhuni, played a key role in spreading Zen and Pure Land teachings, often running convents that doubled as community hubs. You're in a temple, watching a nun chant, her voice steady as she strikes a wooden mokugyo drum. It's hypnotic, and you're tempted to close your eyes, but you'd probably trip over a cushion. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some nuns carried shakujo staffs with jingling rings, partly for rhythm, partly to scare off snakes. Multitasking at its holiest. Historians still argue whether nuns had equal spiritual authority to monks or were sidelined by patriarchal temples. You try to mimic her posture, sitting cross-legged, but your knees protest, and she raises an eyebrow, amused. You grin, caught, and she nods you to a corner to observe. The temple's sparse, bamboo floors, a small altar, but it feels alive. You think back to those peasant women. Remember their relentless fieldwork. These nuns labor too, but their work is inward, wrestling with ego and impermanence. They're not all elite. Some are widows or outcasts, finding refuge in robes. You're struck by the mix, noblewomen and commoners, united by faith. The day unfolds, and you're helping tend a garden, pulling weeds under her guidance. It's meditative, but you're terrible at it, and she jokes your weeds look like abstract art. You laugh, easing into the rhythm. nuns also teach reading, writing, even herbal remedies. And you see one tending a sick villager, her calm a balm. Their lives aren't cloistered. They're bridges between temple and town, offering prayers for births, deaths, harvests. You notice their discipline. Meals are silent, rice and miso savored slowly, and you're hungry just watching. Evening falls, and you're at a lantern-lit service, the nuns' voices weaving a soft chant. You're drawn in, feeling the weight of their devotion. They're not warriors or poets, but their quiet strength reshapes lives. You're starting to see their role as vital, and you're ready for what's next. You're standing at the edge of time, looking back across Japan's ancient tapestry, where women's lives wove the threads of a nation. The air's soft, carrying echoes of Jomon laughter, yayoi work songs, and Heian poetry. You're not in one era now, but floating above them all, piecing together the legacy of Japan's first women. Their stories aren't just history, they're the roots of a culture, and you're about to feel their lasting pulse. Mainstream history shows women shaped Japan from its earliest days. Their roles in survival, spirituality, and art laying foundations for centuries. You imagine a Jomon woman's cord-marked pot. Remember that fishy sushi precursor sitting beside a Heian scroll, both crafted by hands that changed the game. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some modern Japanese festivals, like the Aomori Nebuta, may echo rituals led by ancient shamanesses, their floats carrying faint traces of Himiko's magic. Historians still argue whether women's influence waned as samurai culture rose, or if their subtler power endured in homes and temples. You walk an invisible path, seeing flashes of their lives. There's the yayoi farmer, her rice paddies feeding empires, the Kofun noble, her diplomacy carving alliances, the Onabugeisha, her blade defying odds. You smile, thinking of your clumsy hoe swings with that peasant woman. Her teasing grin felt like a friend's. Their worlds were tough, often unfair, but their resilience shines. You picture a nun's quiet chant, blending with a court lady's poem, their voices weaving a strength that outlasts castles. These women weren't always in charge, but they were never just bystanders. You pause, struck by how their legacy lives. Modern Japan's work ethic, its art, its reverence for nature. You're no historian, but you feel it every step you've taken. From muddy fields to temple gardens, ties to them. They didn't need crowns to matter. You joke to yourself that your Wi-Fi router could use their grit, then laugh, imagining their eye rolls. Their story's a reminder. Ordinary hands build extraordinary things. As night deepens, the echoes fade, and you're left with a gentle warmth. The women of ancient Japan slip back into time, their faces softening in your mind. You're cozy now, the world slowing, their strength a quiet lullaby. Let the Joman fires flicker out, the Heian ink dry, the samurai blades rest. You've walked their paths, felt their pulse, and it's enough. The stars above are theirs too, winking as you drift. Close your eyes, let the hum of their lives carry you to sleep, and know their story lives in you.